Branson Centennial Museum for our Tuesday talk. Reminding you again that every third Tuesday except December, we have a program here. Also, I always like to thank very much Mr. Reese and his wife Barb for allowing us to occupy these spaces. And then being the beggar I am, I always mention we exist on donations and memberships in the Historical Society. We are a part of the White River Valley Historical Society. So if you're not a member, join us. You know, I started playing golf with sand greens. And I did quite well until I got matured a little. And I should have had Don Gardner's tutoring because I had a slice that was like a boomerang. So I gave up golf for a while. So anyway, we're very fortunate today to have two experienced, talented golfers talk with us, Ross Summers and Mark Speight. Welcome.
Do I need this? Maybe for you folks in the back I do. Okay, we'll use the mic. Kind of a small crowd, but we appreciate it. We'll go with quality and not quantity today. But we appreciate everybody showing up. Mark is with me. I brought him down from Springfield because he and I both grew up on what back then was the golf range, but is now Holiday Hills. But we want to give you a little bit of a history lesson today on how that got started and a little bit of history of golf in the Branson area. Obviously, with all the brand new golf courses we have now, it's much, much different than it was way back in the early days. We've become a golf mecca, and back then it kind of was too. A little bit of a different flavor to it, but it was a place where folks could come and enjoy golf and a little bit of Ozarks hospitality. And today we want to talk to you a little bit about Don and Jill Gardner, because they're the ones that really got the ball rolling. Let's go back, however, briefly before Don and Jill got to Branson. There actually was, and in going through my research here at the Centennial Museum, there actually was a golf course built in the early 30s by a group of Branson businessmen. And the information that I had was, it didn't give exactly where it was, but it was somewhere on East 76, but I don't think it's where the golf range eventually ended up. But there was a group of businessmen that put in what they consider to be a golf course. The article that I read says that they got together and formed a committee to put a golf course together, and in 4 weeks they had a golf course going. So, you know, we really don't know how much of a golf course it was, but and it lasted a few years. But then Don and Jill were very well known in the Chicago area. Don was a teaching professional at Oxmoor and Flossmoor country clubs in Chicago. And he had been there for about 17 years and was very well known. The articles that I read indicated he was the best teaching professional in the Chicago area at the time. And Jill was also very well known. She was a radio personality and had written books on hospitality and poise and that kind of thing, and also traveled on the off season. She would travel, she and Don both would travel the country. She would give lectures around the country. And on one of their travels, they happened to stop in Branson. And they found 300 acres out on East 76 that they bought. It was an old farm, and so they moved to Branson from Chicago. They weren't planning on it, but Don got drafted into the Army when he was 34 years old and served 2 years in Europe. He was in the artillery. He didn't really enjoy that, but it was the right thing to do at the time. After the war was over, he stayed in Europe for a period of time and played golf with the Third Army. So he got to play a lot of the very famous courses in Europe. And when he did come home in late 46, 47, they really got down in earnest to creating what would become the golf ranch. They had to carve it out of the old Ozark hillside, as we all know, and they actually used it as a farm until the golf course finally took shape. And it was quite an undertaking for the two of them and their family. Now, as we'll see in some of the slides that we've got, Jill had 3 daughters from a previous marriage, and we'll talk a little bit about them. But the golf course probably wasn't much to look at in the early days, but they worked hard. They put a lot of sweat equity into it, and they eventually became very well known and enjoyed many years of hospitality. And Mark and I both started playing about the same time, I think, late 50s?
Mid-50s,
yeah. Mark was always better than I was.
Oh, I don't know about that.
But let me show some slides here. We'll kind of go through a little bit of what this is a really good picture of Don and Jill, of course, and this was taken at, they're actually sitting on the slab at the golf course. There we go. These are, I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. These are early shots of the clubhouse. It's actually the clubhouse and their residence. Now over on the left-hand side, you see this door over here would eventually become the door to the pro shop. But the rest of it was a restaurant and their residence. There's another shot. You'll see the split rail fence that really ran in front of the clubhouse and along the highway, which was, at that time was East Highway 80. But the story is that when they bought the farm, Don didn't like the wire fence that ran alongside the highway. So he offered to anybody that wanted to take the wire fence if he would swap them out if they would provide a split rail fence. So that's how the split rail fence kind of got to be iconic for the golf ranch. And this is a later picture. This is probably taken in the late 60s, I would guess. Lots of flowers. The slab that you'll see here in the summertime is where we would go out and square dance, right, Marilyn? And it really got to be quite a meeting and greeting place. And Don and Jill really put their heart and soul into making sure that everybody came out to the golf ranch, had a good time. And it wasn't just teaching, they truly worked at it, and I remember this old tractor when I worked there. Okay, this is an interesting picture here. I think this was taken actually before they moved to Branson. I think this is a Chicago picture. But this is Don and Jill, and Jill's 3 daughters. This young lady up at the top here, her name was Lynn Edwards. Now Jill's first husband, his last name was Edwards. So all the kids were named Edwards. When they moved to Branson, Lynn eventually married Vi Aslan. So that's Lynn Aslan, and her husband Vi ran the boat dock.
Sammy Lane.
Sammy Lane for years and years, and Tom knows all about that because he worked there. But that's how Lynn Aslan came to town. She was Jill Gardner's daughter. This young man, the tall young man, is Charlton Heston.
Wow.
He came to town. You remember why he came to town?
I remember when he was here, but Marilyn, do you know?
He came to crown the Buccaneer Ball Queen.
Well, what year was it? Do you remember?
somewhere in the 50s.
Yeah. I remember meeting him, but I was a little 3 or 4 years old, I
Late
think.
50s.
Yeah.
I think he was promoting Ben-Hur or some other movie. He was on a tour promoting a movie and he came here.
Well, it was right about the time Fifth Commandments came out, I believe, wasn't it?
And it was earlier than that. This is probably in the early 50s, I would guess.
Yeah, it was, because Vi Aslan has a picture of him. There's a picture of Vi and Lynn Aslan at the Sandy Lane boat dock.
With him?
Same trip.
Yeah.
So it was 53, 4, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think you're right. Anyway, you can't really understand how tall he was until you put him up. And Don was not a tall guy by any means, but it's quite an extraordinary picture of Charlton Heston. Get my slides working here. The fella in the middle is Forrest Tucker. I don't know who the other guys are, but you'll remember Forrest Tucker as being an actor. He was on F Troop, the old TV series, and he came to Branson and enjoyed the hospitality at the golf ranch. This is Don giving one of his lessons. I don't know who the young lady is, but she's getting a real good lesson from Don. He looks so young there. I just remember Don as having gray hair.
Me too.
Another really good picture of Don and Jill. You never heard Don refer to her as Jill. What was it?
Honey.
It was Honey. You never, in fact, a lot of people called her Honey just because that's the way Don always referred to her, was Honey. Don spoke with an accent, if you never knew him, and I could never figure out what kind of accent it was.
I thought it was kind of German, but
I thought it was a little bit German, but I never really knew. But it was, you know, he was a very, he had an infectious enthusiasm about him. If you ever knew Don, you really couldn't help but like him and enjoy being around him. He was just and Jill was the same way. She was a little bit more laid back but Don was, he was out there. I didn't know this until I saw this slide going through all of these. This is a promotional piece, but it's referred to as Lake Taneycomo Golf Course. This had to be late 40s, early 50s, because I had never heard it referred to as the Lake Taneycomo Golf Course and driving range. This is Don right here, giving a lesson, it looks like. But then this is the entrance that we all know. This is 1956, and you can see all the cars there. There's quite a group out that day.
and that's about when I started playing golf, I think. It was the mid-50s.
Mid-50s. I'm going backwards. Well, there you are, square dancing. This was inside the restaurant. They had to move the tables away and did the square dancing. This obviously was in the wintertime, because if it had been summer, it would have been outside. But Don really enjoyed watching people have fun. That's pretty much...
Not all of us had fun. My mom and dad would make us go out there in the late 50s, and I didn't like it at all.
You weren't the square dancing time.
No.
This is an interesting picture, and I'll call your attention to, first of all, the furniture is all made out of cedar. Now, Vi and Lynn owned a cedar, what would you call it, Tom? A cedar
Furniture.
Cedar furniture factory, basically.
Violin Enterprises.
And all of this furniture was made at the factory. Another thing I want to call your attention to is the mural that went all the way around the top of the restaurant. The mural was designed and painted by Steve Miller.
Oh, wow.
And it's got lots of illustrations from Don from all his golf lessons and so forth. Unfortunately, in August of 1973, the clubhouse burned down, and all of the furniture, and you can imagine all of the cedar just going up in a poof. But a lot of the artwork, all of the artwork basically that Steve Miller had created was destroyed. Steve and Don were very good friends, and unfortunately none of that survived. Speaking of Don's book, but they both had books. This is a copy of Don's. It's really a booklet, but it's a really nice little book. But Don and Jill both had written books. Hers was called Personality Pointers. I don't have a copy of that, unfortunately, but they were both authors, and we don't have a copy of the Personality Pointers, do we, Jim?
Not sure.
I've never seen one. We have several copies of Don's book, but not of the Personality Pointers.
Okay. I grew up in the 50s. I was born in 49, and we started playing golf on the sand greens. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with sand greens, but first of all, they weren't very big, about maybe 15, 20 feet in diameter is how small the greens were. And they were flat as can be. There were no contour or anything like that. And you had to measure around to where your ball was and to a place where you could roll the sand, and then you putt it. So that's what I grew up on. And then in the early 60s, they started building the grass greens. And in the year or two it took them to build the greens, they put the temporary greens out in front of the greens. So we'd have a year to practice on grass sort of greens. And he brought in Seldom Harris to build the golf course. And I think it took about 2 years. And then the first year it opened happened to be the summer that I was going to go with my dad to California to the Republican convention. So I couldn't work that summer because I was going to have to take off for 2 or 3 weeks in the middle of summer. So I just played golf every day, which was kind of nice, and got to be a decent golfer and ended up getting a scholarship to SMS when I graduated. And but what I remember about Don back in those days is Mom and Dad would buy the first set of clubs, and it was 4 clubs and a putter. It was nothing fancy, wood shaft. I mean, but then as you grew, Don didn't ever charge a penny. You'd trade clubs with him, and he'd find someone else to get your clubs. And I never had to pay for a club until I got in high school or something like that. So that was something that really meant a lot to me. And I never paid for a lesson. I mean, Don Gardner would help you any way he wanted to, and never ever would think about charging. And that was very special to me.
I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. I worked for Don in the pro shop one summer, and yeah, he didn't charge me for clubs either.
Yeah. The first set, I think you bought, your parents bought, and then you just traded as you grew up.
Yeah, this is Don and Seldon Harris, like Mark said. They're out surveying the course and really redesigned the entire course in order to put in the grass greens.
Yeah. Some of the holes were pretty similar. 1, 2, and 3 were pretty similar, and that was about it. The rest of them.
One of the things that I remember when we moved to Branson in 1956, and my dad thought he was going to fish all the time. We moved here from West Plains, so Dad thought he was going to fish, but then he took up golf, and our entire family started playing golf and never really fished very much. But I do remember that when we joined the golf ranch, the dues were $35. Not a month, that's a year. $35 a year, and you could play as much golf as you wanted to.
Wow.
A family of 4, that was pretty cheap entertainment at the time. So.
Well, my first set of golf clubs I bought from Don, that I actually bought a full set when it was more than 4 clubs. He charged me $60 for a brand new set of complete clubs.
Don always said, I never make money, I just make friends.
Yeah.
Don had some really great, and working for him for that summer, you could really pick up a lot of the things that he said. Once, when we were given a lesson, he would tell the guy, I don't want all your money, just a little piece of it. Or he would say, I'm going to make you a good golfer if it takes every dime you got. That was one of his favorites.
Yep.
And the best thing he ever said, regardless of what the weather was, he would come in the morning. It could be raining and snowing and lightning, but he'd always say, it's a beautiful day in the Ozarks. But he said it in that wonderful accent that he had. Oops, going backwards there. Okay, this is a very interesting picture. When the sand greens were instituted, Don had more or less a grand opening for the new greens and the new course design. And he brought in Patty Berg to do an exhibition. And this is her right here. For those of you who don't know, Patty Berg was one of the top female golfers in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s. She won over 60 professional tournaments and was one of the founding members of what is now the LPGA, the Ladies Professional Golfer Association. And in fact was the first president of that organization. So this was taken in 1965, and Don brought Patty in and to do an exhibition. The gentleman on the left, his name is Jerry Pettit, and he was the club champion the year prior to this. Then you have Don, Patty Berg, and this young fellow over here on the right is my brother, Jerry. And he was the club champion when he was a senior in high school. He always made me mad because he was always better than I was. But Patty and my brother teamed up to play against Don and Jerry Pettit.
And I was Jerry Pettit's caddy during that thing.
Patty Berg was kind of the female version of Don.
Yes, she was.
She had a wonderfully outgoing personality, told jokes the entire way around the course.
And if she didn't like a shot, she'd take it over. I remember that.
Yeah, she was a great golfer too, by the way. I don't remember who won the match, but that was really a great day in the history of the golf course. I think she had fun too.
And then the next year, 66, I got a hole-in-one on a par 4 for the double eagle on that course right there, number 7.
I should say that there are two things that all golfers like to do. One is to have a hole-in-one, and the other is to shoot your age.
I did that last
And
year.
Mark has done both of those.
In fact, I had 2 hole-in-ones there. The other one was on the par 3, number 4.
You want to talk to him about this? This is Sandy's.
Oh, yes. Their granddaughter was the same age as me, and we went through all 12 grades together. And on her birthday every year, and I remember this, they owned a boat dock, Sandy Lane boat dock. And she would stand on the boat dock and hold a net out there. And Don Gardner would be on the other side of the lake and would hit a ball into that net. And that was his birthday present to Sandy every year.
And this is Don hitting, and he's standing obviously on the east side of Lake Taneycomo, hitting the ball over. And this is Sandy in the canoe, going out to get to retrieve the ball. Yeah, that was a tradition.
Yep.
I talked to Sandy one day last week, and she was talking about Don hitting the ball over to her on her birthday, and I said, I've got a picture of that. The lakefront looks a lot different today, doesn't it? And there's Sandy and Don. Don's giving her a lesson. Was she runner-up to Miss Missouri?
I can't remember.
She was in the Miss Missouri.
Yes, she was.
Beautiful girl. That is Vi and Lynn's daughter. And you worked with her at the dock too, didn't you, Tom? And there's Don out playing with some folks and Sandy. That's one thing you never really saw Don do, is actually play golf. Very rarely would he ever be able to go out and play 9 holes or 18 holes. He was always giving lessons. In all the years I knew Don, I only remember playing a round of golf with him one time, because he was always giving lessons.
If once in a while he'd go around, walk around with you for 1 or 2 holes just to make after he gave you a lesson to see if you were doing it right. And so that's about the only time I ever played with him.
You know, when somebody was taking a lesson from him, you would have them take a couple of swings and hit a couple of balls, and it wouldn't take long. He'd always say, "I got your buck." But got your bug, that's what he was saying, but I got your buck, that's what he'd say.
Swing, swing, and that was his phrase.
The ball only weighs 1 ounce and 62 hundredths. You don't have to swing very hard. It's small, he says. You don't have to swing, you don't have to kill it. Okay, trick shots. Unfortunately, out of all of the hundreds and hundreds of shows, trick shows, golf shows that Don gave, I only have a couple of pictures. So this is Don giving his show. He gave 2 shows a week, normally on Tuesday and Friday. And the summer that I worked for him, I got to help him with his shows. So I would be sitting on a little stool in front of him, and he'd hit a ball, and I'd put another ball on the tee, and he'd hit another one, and put another ball on the tee, and that's how that worked. But it was really, really interesting to see how he would interact with the crowd, and the sense of humor that he brought to the show. This is another, and I'll tell you a little bit about this. What I want to do very briefly is show you some of his trick clubs that he used. You need this. He's got a few of them here. If you're a golfer, you know that if when you get on the green, if you're within a club length, a lot of times if you're playing with some friendly guys, you'll take a gimme if it's within a club length. Well, this was Don's club. That was part of his deal. If you ever got in the rough, this was another club that he'd like to take out. I have no idea how he ever hit this.
But he could actually hit it with that club 150 or 200 yards.
Oh, yeah.
No sign was toast.
What's
I don't know
that?
how he did it.
Would he bring?
He makes the clubs.
He made, oh yeah, he would make, he did make some, yeah, he did make some. Those, but that was always, I've never tried to hit anything with this because I'm afraid I would break it, but you would never know. Oh, here's one. This is called the pitching iron. So, and it was actually made in Louisville, Kentucky. So if you didn't like the way you hit the golf ball, you could hit it with a baseball bat. And this is one of my favorite clubs here. Don would line up to hit the shot so that he was going to hit it with the point of the club. But what he would do, so he was going to hit it like this, but what he would do on his backswing, he would turn the club like that, so he would actually hit it with the face. But nobody ever knew. It was so fast. And of course, he'd sit down like that. So. People were always amazed that he could hit 200 yards with it. And this is, if you had a stiff shaft, if you're a golfer, you either had a stiff shaft but this one was a very wobbly shaft. So. But those shows that he put on, a couple of tricks he did. I don't need a microphone. This is actually, if you can see the little ball down there by Don's knee, he would set 3 balls in a triangle, and then put a ball on top of the triangle. And this was always the grand finale of the show. But he would hit hit that group of balls. One would go straight, one slice, one hook, and the other one would go straight up, and he would catch it. And that's what he's doing there in that picture. He's trying to catch that. He didn't always catch it, but he's trying to catch that ball there in that shot. What do you remember about the shows?
Well, actually, when I was young, he would get some of us kids out there when we were 6 or 7 years old and hit a few balls. And what he was doing was trying to get the parents and grandparents of the people in the show to encourage their kids to play golf. And that's the purpose of it. He said, hey, if these guys are 6 years old, can hit the ball, anyone can, basically.
Yeah.
That's about the only thing I remember about it.
Oh, another thing he used to do, which was pretty funny, he would, and again, he was interacting with the audience the entire time, but he would say, is anybody, any gentleman out there have a watch? So he'd always find somebody that had a watch. And he would take the guy's watch and put it on the ground face up and put 2 or 3 lifesavers on top of the watch and tee the ball up on the lifesavers. And he'd take a couple of practice swings, and of course he'd take a big divot out of the ground. And then he would hit the ball, and the watch would just go flying. Well, what they didn't know was he had swapped out the real watch with one that was in his pocket. And people would freak out because they think the watch was 50 yards off.
Oh my gosh.
So I spent a lot of afternoons putting the watches back together. Just a fabulous showman. This is a picture of lessons that we gave at Kanakuk Camp. Usually one day a week, Don would go over to Kanakuk. That's Don there, and that's actually me right there. We would go over to Kanakuk and teach these kids how to play golf. This was an optional activity that they would pay a little bit extra for, but he always got a huge crowd of kids out. Okay, this is my brother. He was 14 years old in this picture and had just made a hole-in-one, so he got his picture in the paper. This is not so much about my brother, but the people he was playing with. One of them was John Justice, who was Jim and Jeff's older brother, and the other 2 folks he was playing with were Brent and Norwood Speight. Yeah, which is Mark's brother and father.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, he was 14 at the time, and I don't know why you keep things you do in your family, but this is the actual ball that he made the hole-in-one with.
Wow.
And he's got written on here, hole number 5, March 24th, 1962. So I've got that as a memento. This is the golf team that we had in high school in 1969. Let's see. That's Jim Justice right there. You might know a couple of these people. That's David Arney here, Acres and Arney Insurance. And this tall gentleman in the back row is Joe Reich. You might
Oh, look at there.
And I want to make one comment.
Check the
There's
glasses.
twice as many golfers in that picture as there was when I was on the golf team. We didn't have it about 7 or 8 kids on the golf team,
Yeah.
and look how many more there is there.
Wow,
So
nice.
that's changed that much in just about 3
Don.
years.
That's down on the left, yeah.
Wow.
The gentleman right here on the right is our golf coach,
Ron Kyle.
Ron Kyle.
Oh, wow.
Now the next picture I'll show you, I'm doing this because golf has become such a culture by this time, and Don had done such a fabulous job of promoting. But this is the golf team in 1993, and the tall fellow on the left is Craig Westcott,
Oh, wow.
and his family developed the tracks, and he still works there. He's in town. And this fine young gentleman right on the, next to Coach Kyle is Eric Presley.
Oh, that's why it looks
You
nice.
probably know him as Cecil in Presley.
Yeah, there we go.
And that's, Ron Kyle is still there. I think he was the golf coach there for almost 30 years.
I think he came my senior year in school, I think.
Did he really? So it was in 67, 67, and he was still here in 93. So I don't know how many years that is, but that's a lot.
May have been my junior year, but he was there when I was in high school.
Yeah, that's right, because he was our football coach.
Assistant football coach, yeah.
So this is one more good shot of Don. He was inducted into the Ozarks Golf Hall of Fame, much too late actually, in 2008. But very nice trophy that he got. This is the last slide, and I just thought it was such a great shot of Don and Jill. I just wanted to make that our last picture, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
It's really good.
No?
Could
Marilyn?
you kind of give us the history of his golf bag and do you have the privilege of having it or?
No, the golf bag actually belongs to the museum. The clubs I found out at the Cedarville Museum, at the Ralph Foster Museum,
Oh.
and they want them back.
That's how they are.
But it's a good question though, Marilyn. That is the same bag and clubs that he used in all of his shows. And when I went out to pick these up at the museum, I hadn't seen these clubs in 55 years.
Wow.
And it had really wonderful memories of Don and Jill. Yeah, the bag belongs here. The clubs belong out there. Mark?
When did the golf ranch close?
Good question. Don actually sold the golf course in 1965. He retained the pro shop and the ability to teach there, but he actually sold the property in '65. And after that, it was still the golf ranch, but then, as I said, the clubhouse burned in '73. Don died in April of '73. He died of cancer. And the clubhouse burned that August, and we all said, you know, if he had been here, he would have probably died anyway. So, but I don't know when they changed the name from the golf ranch to Holiday Hills. Once the new owners took over, they developed the property, and of course now it's condominiums and so forth. Honestly, I don't know.
I played with my dad until he got too bad to play. And that was still in the early to mid '80s, so I know it was still the golf ranch.
It was. They didn't have very many golf carts back then. You had to own your own golf cart. They didn't rent it. You had it was walk. It was walk. You had to walk. Yeah, there weren't very many golf carts.
9-hole course?
It was a 9-hole course when it was sand greens. When they put in the grass greens, they put in 18.
No.
Oh, first of all,
it was just 9 when
That's
I was
right,
in
it
high
was
school.
9,
It
and
was
then
about
later
the
on-
late '60s.
Later on, they put in the second 9. Yeah.
It was around 79 or 70, something like that.
Early 70s, late 60s, early 70s when they put in the second 9. Yeah.
So did Holiday Hills redesign the course, or is it still basically the same course?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the holes are similar to what it was, and but most of it is not the same. But there is some holes that are the same.
They put a lot of water on it. And when we were playing there was one pond. In fact, the hole that Mark had his hole-in-one on, he had to hit it over the pond. And now they've got lots of water out there, but at that time, there wasn't any.
And when I got my hole-in-one, I didn't even think I could get on the green. There were people on the green putty when I made the hole-in-one. So the pin wasn't even in.
Really?
I didn't even know I made it until one of the guys in the guy that was putting turned around, that ball went in the hole. You couldn't see it, you know.
Wow.
But, you know, I guess the main thing I want everybody to understand is that Don and Jill really promoted Branson. They were early participants of what hospitality as we know it is all about. Jill was a gracious host. Don was, no, you never met anybody he didn't like, or nobody ever didn't like Don. They were just fabulous people, and they
Always had a smile on his face.
always had a smile. They had an airstrip out on the golf course, and people would fly in from all over just to eat dinner. They'd come in, they'd fly. It wasn't much of an airstrip. It was rocky, and
get a golf lesson.
they'd get a golf lesson and eat and go home. And people did that all the time. But even though it was, you know, it wasn't a fabulous country club like you're going to find in big cities, but it was Don and Jill that really made the property. And yes, ma'am.
What would they think if they saw what type of golf courses we have here now?
Oh my.
The money that's been poured into golf is...
Don always wanted more for the golf course. I can tell you that, because he would, when I worked for him, he would say that he really thought, you know, it needed more development. He was in favor of the, you know, the houses or the condos around it, because he wanted people to really, you know, enjoy it. I think he would love what's going on.
Well, the first house, I think it was the first house that was built out there was on number 3, and it was J.C. Penney's house.
Wow.
Yeah.
But
I think he would be in favor of the development.
I just think, coming from such small beginnings to what we have now,
Well,
I mean, all you can say is, wow.
he
That's
always,
exactly right.
he always wanted to grow it. He just never had the resources to do it. You know, when you're only charging $35 a year for a membership.
Wow.
I don't think he ever envisioned that Branson would become what it did.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Well, it's exciting that they got it started.
Oh,
Mark, Ross, did they have any particular relationship, business or otherwise, with Jim Owen? Because they're contemporary in their careers.
they were. I don't know. I know that, you know, they had interaction. And,
I'm sure they did.
And you know that Jim Owen was a big promoter of whatever Don was doing out there, because he brought people.
Well, they were just promoting something different. They were both doing the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was in the White River with Jim.
There were several people way back then that were really promoters of Branson. Jim Owen, Ben Parnell, and Don. Those may have been the big three. I don't know who else.
The Hershin family, you got to count that.
Very well, Hershins. Okay, the Hershins. But in the early, late 40s, early 50s, Don was right. He was front and center of all of the promotion and bringing people to town. I think he would be astounded at what we've become, of course, but he was right there in the very beginning.
When was the second course built in Branson?
When?
Point Royale.
Which one was it?
I think it was Point Royale.
Point Royale?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it might have been. Yeah. There was a small
That was in the
course.
mid-'80s, I believe.
There was a small course over in Forsyth when I was in high school.
That was ever when that's the first time I played grass greens was the one in Forsyth.
Back
So it was
in,
It's
You'll be
called
back-
Taneycomo Country.
Taneycomo. It's kind of back over there where the high school is now, I believe.
No, it's
Oh.
north of
Further
there,
north.
about a half a mile.
Yeah,
Was it? Okay.
North, yeah, kind of, yeah.
it's on the east side of the scenic view.
A guy named Milton Ross ran that. And I remember that because Don really didn't like him. He was the only person I ever knew that Don really didn't care for. And I don't know why, but they didn't get along very well. I played that course once or twice, I guess, but
I played it once, and before Branson, Golf Ranch had grass greens, because that was the first time I played grass green.
of course now all the fabulous golf courses truly world-class golf courses we've got here now. I think Don would enjoy playing some of those.
Well, there wasn't any golf course between Springfield and the state line except here. I mean,
Yeah, that's right. If you're going through town, you had to stop and play here.
and there was only 2 or 3 golf courses in Springfield at the time.
That's right. It was awesome to see. Any other questions? Well, Mark has to go back to Springfield because he's got to take his grandkids to a golf lesson.
I pick them up at school on every Tuesday. I pick them up at school and take them to a golf lesson.
I find, Ross, we do have a copy.
You did have a copy. There's Jill's book. I didn't know you had a copy of it.
Interesting. For Marie Bills, our guest at the golf ranch, October 25, 1958. I don't understand what the next, and then just signed, Jill Edwards Gardner.
Oh.
I didn't know you had that, Jim.
We are. That is cool.
That's a hardbound book.
Yeah.
Our questions, commentaries, golf stories.
We appreciate y'all coming and drop a little dollar bill in the kitty on the way out the door.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.